Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, DJ Stewart.
And I'm your co-host, Tommy D. Duncan III, otherwise known as TV3. Jimmy, it is Wednesday, November the, Jesus, what day is it today, Jimmy? November the 9th, 2022. Jimmy, if it is Wednesday night.
As Black Men Speak. So let's give a big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music, to our own studio, and Forest Films for supplying our virtual studio. And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, share, spread the word about the channel. And this is the most progressive informational show on the internet dealing with the issues that pertain and affect Black people. Tom, I see we have two talented, wonderful, beautiful guests returning. Uh, I know I've seen these faces before. I definitely remember Miss Carla um, and her daughter, which I assume is probably asleep now, and her husband. So, and Miss Kandra, are you still engaged, or you got married and I didn't get the invitation?
No, I'm still engaged. I'm still engaged.
Okay. I guess my invitation's in the mail then. Uh,
Yes.
so Tom, please introduce our topic and our two wonderful guests, and let's get this thing rolling.
All right, Jimmy, thank you very much. And we appreciate our special return guests who are coming back. As we may have announced a long time ago, we've had Miss Carla McGruder and Mrs. Carla McGruder, and Miss Kandra Jones on a couple of prior shows. And we got such a good response from their content and what they brought to the table that we decided to make them a regular on our show on a periodic basis when they have time to talk about areas that they can bring the funk and bring the fire. So we want to thank them for making time on their calendars, for coming back, addressing our constituency on Black Men Speak. And today, we're going to talk about, one of the things that, regardless of whether you are married, single, male or female, that we need to address in one way, that is extending the mortality of Black men and our quality of life, and through one specific vector, which is prostate cancer. One of the big two or three that are probably the most common causes of later stage diseases in men in general in America, and Black men in particular. And so we want to talk today about prostate cancer, what it is, why it happens, not just the physiological impact of what prostate cancer does, but the emotional and psychological impact that it has on those who get it, their family, and those who love them. But before we get into that, we would like to have our special guests to introduce themselves, a little bit about what they do and their background, and then we will get into the show. So, Miss Carla, welcome back. Talk to us. For those who have not met you before, seen you before, tell us a little about yourself, your background, and what you're doing these days.
Yes. Well, good evening, everyone, and happy Men's Awareness Days, or Men's Health, rather, Men's Health Awareness Month. I'm Carla McGruder. I am a genetic counselor. Genetic counseling, generally what we do is look at the personal and family history of disease and family to try to figure out why it happens. And if we can determine why it happens, doesn't mean that you're stuck there. It means that we can do things, prevent it from happening, or make ways to detect whatever that illness is, including cancer, ways to detect that early so that it can be treated so that you can be here for a lot longer.
All right. Thank you very much. And Miss Kandra, welcome back, of course, as well. And thank you for sharing your time. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those who haven't met you before on our show, a little bit about your background and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Kandra Jones. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I currently work in an integrated behavioral health program for a clinic. And in that, we just focus on the whole person, not just the health side, the physical health side, but the mental health side, and bridging the gap between that for the patients that come into the clinic.
All right. Thank you, ladies, so much for introducing yourself. And let's kind of talk about the different vectors. And in particular, prostate cancer. I mean, it's one of those things. We talk to the doctor, we talk about health, wellness, and those types of things. And I think, heart disease, I think is number one in terms of mortality rate. in men and Black men in addition to that. And then I believe cancers, the different types of cancers that can attack you. But prostate cancer in particular is very, very prevalent, among men within our community. And we're going to talk about it today. So we'd like your insight, your thoughts. For those who don't know, let's first start talking about what prostate cancer is and how it affects us. So, Carla, since you're kind of the deep medical brains, for us today, we want to learn something from you. So, tell us about your study, your research on prostate cancer, what it is, how it works, how we get it, why we get it, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and cancer is one of those things that certainly as we get older, men, women, everyone, can impact us. And that's because cancer is essentially one cell in your body that not only refuses to die, but then spurs on and causes other cells to continue to grow as well. All of us are remade anew all the time. So the cells that you have today are not the cells that you're going to have tomorrow. They die off and you have new cells. And then as you get older and older, you get other cells. When these cells don't die and they stay and they keep reproducing and not dying, that is what cancer is. When that happens, when cells refuse to die, they can spread to other parts of the body, what we call metastasize. And when a cancer is in one area and then spreads to other parts of the body, that makes it harder to treat. And that's why when we hear about cancer spreading to other parts of the body, the last stage of cancer, stage 4, when it becomes hard to treat, then that's when we see, unfortunately, people can pass away from it. So that's what cancer of the prostate is. A prostate is a male organ that only men have. It's a male reproductive organ. And having cancer in that area is certainly something that a lot of people don't like to talk about. So for women, we just came out of October, you saw all the pink in Walmart, probably people walking and marching in pink down your street, and people got, save the tatas and all kinds of strong like a woman, all that stuff. It's real cute. But then we get to November, we want to talk about prostate cancer, and talking about prostate cancer isn't something that is as sexy, isn't something that we want to talk about. And I think that's because a lot of men know the way that you check for prostate cancer, or
Yes.
the ways that people have checked for prostate cancer in the past has been one where it takes someone what's called a digital exam, essentially taking a finger and going up the anus to get to the prostate. So there are a lot of people. Right. They go, whoa, don't touch me back there. I invite you back there. I'm good. I'm a man. I'm strong. I don't want all that. In the meantime, if cancer is growing there, that is a reliable way to tell if your prostate is larger than what it should be. Your prostate can be enlarged for other reasons that are not cancer, but either way, if your prostate isn't doing well. This, men, when you have to keep going to the bathroom. When you go to the bathroom, only a little bit comes out and you're going frequently. When your wife, your partner, whatever is like, you going to the bathroom again? Your grandkids are like, dang, Pop, you just came from the bathroom, and your stream isn't quite well. It can also impact how you perform in the bedroom. These are things that are concerning, but for that same reason, men, because it's a private area, don't like to talk about it and also don't like to be screened for it. The way you're screened or checked to see if you have prostate cancer usually happens at age 50. You go in at age 50, and congratulations to you all. It is not just a digital exam that you have to get. There's now blood testing you can do. They can test your blood.
Wait, stop. Did you just say that you don't have to do the digital exam anymore?
Most men don't. We're gonna come back around to that.
Okay.
While it's still the most reliable way, some people say I don't want to.
We're real excited out there.
I'm sure because there's a different way, and that's at least kind of a top of the ground way for people who have a lower risk for prostate cancer. We'll talk about that in a sec. But generally, for those who say, I don't want to do that, you can get a blood sample. They'll test your prostate specific antigen is what it is. And when they test that, if that level that they're looking for is high in your body, it could signify that you have prostate cancer. Then that is when you do have to do things like a digital exam and then go through other ways to check to be sure and confirm if you have prostate cancer. If that level is low in your body, good news means that generally you have a low likelihood of having prostate cancer and you can go on about your business. That is a screening test. That's not a yes, no. That's a maybe, maybe not. It's just different in medicine. But that is something that you can do where you can get everybody else generally goes at age 50 to get that done, and you can get that every year. Now, Black men, it's different. Prostate cancer in general, there's about a 10% risk that any man walking down the street is going to have prostate cancer. There are certainly things you can do, lifestyle, eating well, exercising, all those things are always going to help your risk to be healthy in general. But even for those people who do that, there's this 10% risk to have prostate cancer just because you don't live in a vacuum, right? You got stuff in the air, other things that are happening. For Black men, however, it's about 20% risk to get prostate cancer.
So let me make sure I got this right. For men in general, all communities, it's a 10% risk. And what you're saying that for Black men in particular, regardless of the circumstances, it's a 20% risk.
You got it.
Why?
20 to 25%. That why is the big thing. And to tell you the truth, the answer is we don't know. There are suggestions that perhaps it's something genetic, right? There's something hereditary. There is something to say, well, maybe the type of prostate cancers that we're seeing, there's something that's tying into some other genetic things. Stress, trauma, right, Kandra, are all things that can increase the chances of having any type of illness. And certainly being in this country, like we saw yesterday for Election Day, can be stressful if you are someone that's of color, if you are someone that is Black. That is also something that's concerning. So you will see the answer of we don't know. I will always say that everyone in science, everyone in oncology, is something that we fall back on because we don't have a lot of data. And while we don't have a lot of data because Black people have not been in a lot of research, Black people have reason to not trust research because research generally hasn't done well by us. And we also haven't been able to see the fruits and benefits of that research. So you do research on a population, and then you figure out whatever answer you need, and then you go and sell that solution, right? Which outprices the people who were in the research from even having that. So I am not someone that's going to say or blame Black people for not being in a space that hasn't been as welcoming. But to answer the question of why that number is higher, we don't know.
Gotcha.
Do know is that there are solutions to do that. But yes, Black men have a higher chance of even having prostate cancer. The cancers that Black men have are more aggressive than what we see in other populations, and the chance that Black men will die from these prostate cancers is higher as well.
Do you believe, so you mentioned stress, some other vectors that may have an impact on that, and obviously we know that stress does have a way of weakening your immune system. Might that be part of it?
Absolutely. And so while there have been a small amount of studies that try to quantify the different type of stress, primarily trying to quantify the stress that being discriminated against because of your race, how that can day to day have these factors that increase the load of stress, that's still something that's hard to quantify, right? Because if you have things like a strong family system, strong resiliency where you're able to rely on other support groups, maybe be around more people that look like you, or maybe you're naturally smart, whatever. These can be things that offset some of that trauma or some of that stress. So it's hard to quantify. But yes, any type of stress is going to be something that's going to make things worse. Healthcare disparities, not having access to great care. Maybe you go in to go say, let me go ahead and see my doctor about prostate cancer. It takes you 2 months to get in because the doctors who take your insurance, or you don't have insurance, so the ones that can see you at the local hospital, they're pushed out where it takes you 2 to 3 months to do that. And maybe you forget about your appointment by then. Maybe you can't get off work for that. Versus if you have great insurance, you're in a different area, you call a doctor to say, I want to get my prostate screened, and maybe you get in that next week. That's going to be very different.
Now, before we even get to all this, and unfortunately, many of us, we just don't remember all the stuff that we were taught about physiology in the body and what all these organs do. What the heck does the prostate do for us in the first place, that when we get this prostate cancer, it causes problems? I mean, I'm pretty sure there's some people out there who are asking, what the hell is the prostate doing for anyway?
Yeah, no, so it's funny because anytime I hear someone that asks what the prostate does or anything like that, it's usually somebody who I've talked to for a while, or maybe if there is a man that's asking me that question, it's because we've been talking for about 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and now they can kind of go like, okay, I can actually, ask you the question. But generally, I don't think people ask that question. They just know that men have it. And really, there are some people, a lot of women that actually don't know that they don't have it until I'm talking
And
to
it's
them.
interesting because, knowing what I know, we know kind of what happens when the prostate is removed, what can happen, but let's kind of get first to what the prostate does.
Yeah, so the prostate, and again, I said that you have to go in through the anus to get to the prostate. Where it's located is there and kind of behind, the bladder essentially. And the whole function of the prostate, along with a couple of other vesicles and everything else that's in that area, is to produce sperm. So it's part of that process. It's not just produced in the prostate. Again, it goes through there, goes through some other vesicles and other things to get to where it needs to go. But that's why the prostate is important. So that is also why if you are having problems in the bathroom, right, where you're having problems letting go of all your urine, you're peeing, you still feel like you have to pee, but it literally won't come out, then that is because your prostate could be pushing up on your bladder in a way or blocking it where it's not able to come out, but you're still having that feeling of urgency, even though there's nothing there. Also, the reason of why you mentioned something about, what happened when it comes out. And that's another thing. Some people kind of go, something's not quite right there, but I don't want you touching it because, God forbid, if something happens and you have to pull it out, I'm going to have problems, in the bathroom. I will say when prostate cancer is found, the treatment avoids taking out the prostate. What you want to try to do is try to reduce the cancer or the cells with radiation, and that's usually very targeted to the prostate. If cancer has spread to other parts of the body, then that's when chemotherapy is done to try to kill cells in other parts of the body. But you want to target it with radiation. There are also hormones that are then done long term to keep that cancer at bay. If those things fail, if it's really, really aggressive, then that's when you start having the conversation about removing the prostate.
Right. So I recall there's radiation. My father's been through that treatment before for prostate. There's radiation, there's chemotherapy. And then obviously the most invasive is removal. And, I remember my father going through radiation and he lost a lot of weight. He had no appetite. Chemo, it has its consequences as well. So talk to us a little bit about, because some people do have questions, what is the difference between radiation and chemo?
Yeah, so it's about where you're targeting where the cancer cells are. So like I said before, cancer is just something that happens when a cell won't die. And so if you can figure out where that is and it's in one area, the radiation kind of burns it away. So if it's in one space, you can take care of it there. For other cancers and other parts of the body, that's when you hear somebody maybe having that particular thing removed. So you might hear somebody who has colon cancer and they have a part of their colon removed because it's right there. You can excise it and the rest of your colon is going to work fine. Breast cancer, you find a cancer. If it's small enough and we test it and it hasn't gone anywhere, you can take that cancer out and you keep the rest of the breast because the breast is going to function just fine. We don't want to take out the prostate because we can't pick and choose and go, we're going to take this nugget or do that. And because of where it is in the body. So radiation targets those cells exactly where they are. So radiation is a treatment that you want to do when the cancer is in one place, and we know that.
And so those would be instances, for instance, where you found it early, it's very narrow or small in scope in terms of the cancerous cells.
Correct. And that's a great point that you bring up because the majority of prostate cancers, when you're looking at them, prostate cancer generally grows really slow. Really slow. So usually when you'll hear some oncologists, when they see a prostate cancer, they'll say this might have been growing 10, 15, 20 years. Wow. We're not sure. But with Black men, the prostate cancers that we see are more aggressive, where perhaps it doesn't take that long amount of time to grow, which is why instead of being screened at age 50 for prostate cancer, the recommendation is for Black men to start that screening around age 40. Family history changes things, but 40. That's even if you don't have a family history of cancer. And I think that that's something good because sometimes taking into account that we have a higher incidence of certain disease, if you're saying, well, you need to be checked like everyone else, then that's a healthcare disparity. That's being treated wrong off the bat. But if everybody realizes, hey, you should be checked at age 40, that is something that's really important to bring up. But radiation is when it's local, when it's in one area. If the cancer has started to go into different areas of the body and spread, then that's when you do chemotherapy. And that's why you're right. You get super sick because the chemotherapy is really treating the cancer all over the body. And when cancer spread, it spreads to 4 places: brain, bone, liver, and lung. Brain, bone, liver, and lung. So you might hear someone who has prostate cancer, but now they might have figured it out when they broke their leg. And turns out it was because there was cancer there. Or you might hear someone who had prostate cancer and then they weren't able to speak or anymore or something like that because it spread to the brain. So for me, as a genetic counselor, when people don't quite know what stage their loved one's prostate cancer was, I start asking questions. When they pass away, did they say it spread anywhere? Or if somebody says, I had an uncle who died of liver cancer, my first question is going to be, was that liver cancer or did it start somewhere else and spread to the liver? And then that's when you'll get the story of like, well, I think, no, it was in the prostate. And then he also had liver cancer. And I know that that's the same cancer, but it spread. So even as you're talking to your family, really try to get these details and also make sure that your doctors know those details too.
So you said something that was pretty interesting. And I know we probably heard it, but it maybe just kind of went over our heads. And when you say it starts someplace and it's spread, and we've heard of that. But I mean, you talk about prostate cancer specifically for men. Colon cancer is another one that we've got to watch out for. Obviously, most people associate the lung cancer with, carcinogens, with smoking, things of that nature. And so it starts someplace and it goes to other different places as well. So there is no way, and that's kind of a question, rhetorical, to really know where it starts. But it could start in the prostate and then it could go to other places in the body. Am I hearing that correct?
Yes, you're hearing that correctly. And yes, you can know where it starts from. When they test that cancer, they're looking at your lung, looking at your liver, and they test that cancer because you can test the cancer. And then once you know there's cancer, the pathologist, the person who's looking at the disease and looking at the slides and looking at the cancer itself, can run tests on that. And the tests on that, based on that, can let us know what we're looking at. So you can look at that thing and go, oh, you know what? This is definitely a prostate cancer. This is a colon cancer. So you get that on the pathology report when they're telling you, here's the cancer. We found it in your brain, but it's a prostate cancer. It's a breast cancer. That's generally when you know. Now, maybe years ago, decades ago, people didn't know that information. Or again, things get lost in translation, right? You lose a loved one, you know it was cancer. You don't care to hear about anything else. So maybe throughout the generations, you don't know that. But just like you might be able to look at someone's face and go, that's your granddaddy nose, right? Or that's your something. The pathologist can look at something, look at characteristics and go, this only lights up if it's colon cancer, if it's prostate cancer. So you can know.
Gotcha. No, that is good information. And I don't want to completely bombard all of the questions here. So I'm just kind of throwing a lot of stuff out there. So I do apologize about that. Jimmy.
No, it's important stuff to hear.
Yeah.
I did want to say really quickly for some families, and something that is important to me as a genetic counselor, again, looking at personal and family history of cancer, the question you ask of, why did this happen? We don't know. For about 10% of prostate cancers, there is a gene that we can point to that you inherited from someone, that you got from mom or got from dad, that's been passed down in the family that can increase your risk for prostate cancer. For some of these, it may be that you were born with that 20%, 25% risk of prostate cancer, much higher than other people. And if we know that, then we can also know for those who have prostate cancer, if you're eligible for other treatment that only works for people with that gene problem, what we call a mutation. And especially you can know if there's an increased risk for you to have other cancers. So there are some genes that increase the risk of prostate cancer, but also increase the risk of pancreatic cancer. Maybe there's a gene that increases the risk of prostate cancer, but also increases the risk of colon cancer, kidney cancer. Knowing that gene can help us understand how to treat you. Knowing that gene can let us know what's coming down the road. And if you haven't had cancer, knowing that you have this gene mutation can then say, let's make sure you stay cancer free. Prostate cancer in men can also have not just implications for if they pass that gene down to their sons, but if they pass that gene down to their daughters have a much higher chance for breast cancer, high chance for ovarian cancer, and high chance for pancreatic cancer, all those colon cancers as well. So it's important for everyone in the family to know about cancer history and also know that there is guidelines, there is plans in place where if you tell your doctor, my dad died of prostate cancer, you should be able to have genetic testing covered by your insurance. And there's other resources where they will cover that for you if you don't have insurance or testing that's done at an out-of-pocket that isn't more than $250. There are ways to know that stuff where people shouldn't just go, oh, that's prostate cancer. Yeah, that's not really linked. That's a lie. And
So
especially
let me make sure that I heard you correct. So a father could have prostate cancer, which is a male-specific antigen. But what you're saying is he could pass down a gene to his daughter that would increase the likelihood of a breast cancer or another cancer vector that is more feminine in nature. Did I hear that correct?
Correct. It's one gene, but that gene performs differently in men and women.
Gotcha.
So it's the same gene, and that gene knows if you're male or if you're female. And that gene gets a lot of play for October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Is something called the BRCA or BRCA genes. There's BRCA1 and BRCA2. And those are genes that we know for women increase the risk way high for breast cancer. Usually women have, again, about a 10% risk for breast cancer. Having one of those genes could mean that there's an increased risk of breast cancer up to 85%. There's also an increased risk for ovarian cancer that is very aggressive, an increased risk for pancreatic cancer. Those women can pass that gene on to their daughters, same risk. They can pass that gene on to their sons, and that's when those sons get the prostate cancer and also male breast cancer.
So it's somewhat like a chameleon, for lack of a better term, in terms of...
Sometimes it can be a chameleon in the fact that in men, while men's risk for prostate cancer and breast cancer and pancreatic cancer is high, it's not as high as, say, if it's in women where they have a very high risk. So sometimes you might see your aunt or your sister have breast cancer and think that has nothing to do with me, but it does. It could increase your risk for cancer. Or you can see it where there's a gene the gene is passed down through the father's line. So we see increased risk for prostate cancer, but the women don't see any breast cancer because it's been passed down to the men and it gets down to the daughter. And now it's like, why does she have breast cancer at 42? That makes no sense. And it's like, no, you had a history of prostate cancer. We should have tested you for this gene. So it's all connected is what we know now. Whether you're male or female, if there's family history of cancer, or if you yourself have had cancer, and even if you're on the other side of that, which congratulations to you if you are, talk to your doctors about this in your family because there could be genetic testing you can do, which is just a blood test or even a saliva test that you spit into a tube, test your DNA, and looking at those genes to see, is there a reason? Is there what we call a mutation where the gene isn't working well, where it is increasing your risk for cancer? And if that's the case, we're going to say you should be coming in to be checked for cancer earlier. Women at age 25 for those cancers, men at age 40. 25. There's surgeries on the table where the women can have surgery to remove the breast and get plastic surgery, whatever, to build other breasts, but to remove that risk of cancer. We want to know these things because, again, trying to make sure if we know the reasons why people are getting cancer, if we can prevent that from happening or at least catch it at an early stage before it gets to those later stages.
So let me ask you this. I mean, you talked about that 10 to 20% in the general population, 20% in our community. Take 10 men in the general population, 1 out of 10 of those men is going to get prostate cancer. In our community, 2 out of 10, 1 out of 5 is going to get that prostate cancer. Well, what about the other 80 to 90%? What's causing those folks to get prostate cancer outside of walking around?
Yeah, that's the part that we don't know. So we know that if you're in an area, and this is the tricky part, if you're in an area that's been around a lot more toxic things, maybe you grew up around a power plant, maybe you grew up, in around a rice mill, grain mill where the water was contaminated, which we know that in our communities we see a lot of that, unfortunately. Then we know those things can increase the risk for cancer. If you are, again, someone who does not work out, who is overweight, it doesn't cause the cancer, but can increase the chance for cancer. And again, if you're not taking care of your mental health, if there are other things that are happening where it's causing you to stress like crazy, that can be an issue. And speaking of these things, if I'm talking to someone and I'm telling them they have this gene that could increase the risk of cancer, and maybe they know that now I didn't tell their kids, and their kids may have this increased risk, but they don't have a good relationship with their kids, or they're not quite sure, that they've told, a partner about the other kids that exist that they don't know. Or maybe someone is hearing that they have this gene mutation and they inherit it from a father that's not there, from a mother that was abusive. All these things of telling people that you have an increased risk for something that you don't have, or you inherit it from someone else, brings up a lot of family stuff. And that's when, as a genetic counselor, why I do handle those things acutely. And we address, like, tell me what's going on in your brain. This is a lot to handle. Because then it comes into, I didn't inherit anything from him. He didn't leave me anything in his will, but I got this gene. Or, you know, we've heard it all, that particular thing. Or, man, I have this burden because I'm thinking I'm leaving my kids with this legacy, and that's not what I wanted to do. Or when it's just like the funeral of someone who passed from that, and they're usually coming to me at an age where that person passed away to say, do I have this now? All these things are things that we talk about and do need to be addressed. But then I definitely go on and shunt that off and say, you should see someone like Kandra to try to talk about the impact of how these things impact family dynamics, who's not talking, and people who were just like, they did have a gene and maybe they didn't tell the family members because they don't talk to them like that. All these things come up too, but it's important as families that we talk about our family history, to move forward.
I appreciate that because I was just getting ready to bowl down Kandra's alley when you mentioned the family relationships, communications between family members, functional and or non-functional, and how something like this impacts your family dynamics. I mean, and especially Kandra looking at it from a intergenerational standpoint, because I mean, I can speak to this. I'm pretty sure you guys can as well. Depending on the age, of certain folks in your family, grandparents, great grandparents, parents, their communication styles and their communication period is going to be a little bit, like the greatest generation, the silence. There are certain things that they take to the grave, all the way down to Gen Z. They keep it at 100, ain't nothing they don't talk about. So talk to us about, Kandra, how something like this impacts family relationships, communication, dynamics, things of that nature. What comes to mind?
Yeah, I think the first thing to address is when you are diagnosed with an illness or anything, really just daily challenges, life period, you're going to have different stages of emotions, different things that you're going to feel, different ways you're going to how you're going to see the situation. And so I kind of first wanted to kind of break down some of the things that someone might experience if they find out they may have the gene, or if they find out that they do have prostate cancer. One of the first things that you find to happen is denial. So they go through this denial phase of, oh, whatever, that's not true. I've been perfectly fine up until now. Or for those who say, you tell them they have the gene, oh, I'm good, I work out, there's nothing wrong. But they're not even trying to get themselves prepared in case it does happen, or doing anything to limit the possibility of it happening. So that denial shows up, and then they don't do anything. They don't go to regular appointments, and they may, even if they were those type of people who were going to appointments regular, they may just stop altogether. And so that's one of the first things you see when it comes to this. And then you have this frustration and disappointment, and they become upset with themselves, or like Carla said, you're upset with your family, your parents for possibly passing down this gene. You feel disappointed in the fact that you may have passed it down to your children, or disappointed in the fact that you thought you did everything you could to make sure you're healthy for your grandkids or whatever that may be. So there's this frustration and disappointment that can come. And then there's the worries of the side effects. Radiation, chemotherapy, that's a tough process, and it's going to come with multiple things that's going to change in that person's body and that person's appearance. So there's a sense of loss that comes with that, losing who they are, losing their appearance, they losing their hair. Someone who prides themselves in their hair, or if they're a muscular person who's used to working out and we're going through this process, you're probably going to lose a lot of that appearance. And so you come through this thing of a changing of identity. You're changing who you are. You're changing how you present yourself. Somebody may see you just as a person with prostate cancer. So it takes away from who you were prior to getting that diagnosis. But also in that change of identity, especially for men, you find them to be the breadwinners. So when they're going through this process of chemotherapy or radiation, they're most likely not able to work because it takes a toll on the body. And so the mom is, or the wife is having to take on majority of the responsibilities, or their parents are having to step in, and you get this feeling of being less than a man, that you're not doing your part in providing for the family because you are tackling this illness. And then there's mood swings, you're just changing your emotions, your hormones are switching. And then feeling alone is one of the last things that I wanted to touch in regards to what can come with it. Is you feel isolated, that you're the only one who's going through this, no one understands, and you kind of find yourself isolating. And this is one of the things that you want to look for when you're trying to identify if there's a mental challenge that is starting to arise from this diagnosis. If you're seeing someone who's isolating themselves, who's not communicating, whose behaviors are changing, the mood swings, then these are when the conversation needs to be addressed, where what can we do to help you get through this process. So I wanted to make sure to touch on those different stages of emotions that can present themselves.
So, I mean, I appreciate you bringing all of that up, and let's kind of talk about the support system. I have a cousin, young
Mhm.
cousin, late twenties, I believe she is, and she got breast
Mm.
cancer, and she had to go through radiation therapy, and she's a young. I don't think at that age that you're having to deal with someone potentially that's that invasive, as a young person, and then she
Mhm.
has on top of that a very young child as well. And it was interesting because I was talking to some family members, and she has sisters, and of course her mom, etc. And then what they did is
Mhm.
they show support because she did lose her hair,
Mhm.
and you talk about the pride that women take in terms of their hair and their beauty, and men to a certain degree also with their virility. And what they did is when she went through that process, they all shaved their heads as a show
Mhm.
of support and saying, hey, we are here with you, because that, I presume, can be a very traumatic situation, going through not just the process but the physical, well, let's be very clear, emotional and psychological repercussions of going through that type of procedure.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think having the support system and those that are around you, or the caregiver, the one who's the main person who steps in and really takes on that responsibility. I think the first thing that the person who's caring for these individuals should focus on is ensuring that they have their autonomy and their independence. And I say that when you are diagnosed with an illness that kind of takes you out of who you are and it weakens your body, people seem to do things for them even without asking them, is this okay? And so I say that you've lost a lot of who you are. The least someone can do is ask questions. What is it that you can do? Don't assume that they need help with every aspect of their life. What is it that they can do? How do they want certain situations to go? Give them autonomy in making certain decisions, so that they don't feel like they've lost their whole selves. And so I think that's the first thing, is giving autonomy and independence where it can be given. And then, like we mentioned before, communication. Communication is key in regards on both sides. It's communication is important when with the individual that's been diagnosed with cancer, to communicate the things they need, the things they want, communicate how they're feeling, and reaching out to those for support, because someone can only help you to the extent that they know you need help with. And then communication on the other side, being the person that steps in appointments times, and helping that bridge that communication gap, whether it's between the patient and the doctor, because when you are going through this, your mind is probably not where it should be, and you're weak in that stance. So it's important to kind of to take on the weight of some of the information that's being expressed, because a lot is going to come at you during that time. And then I also think just being supportive. And then I think also for the family members that are providing the caregiving, you have to take care of yourself as well. And I think a lot of people forget about that. So a family member who's caring for someone, they may give their all to these people, and then they don't take care of themselves, and they put themselves in a situation that not only deteriorates their health, but they're not able to be 100% for those who need them. And so when you're a caregiver, when you're a support system for someone who is going through something like this, it is important to make sure that you are taking care of yourself first. That way you can be there for your loved ones. But in addition to that, you can seek out support systems. You can seek out groups of other individuals who have a family member that's going through something, because although you're not the only person going through it, it's still important to try to find the niches of those different communities that you can talk to, who can understand exactly what you're going through. So those are some of the things that you can do as a caregiver.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So going back to Carla, and we don't really know the answers as to what potentially causes this. I mean, I would presume obviously some lifestyle decisions have something to do with it, but it's not like you can all of a sudden start eating more broccoli and cauliflower, and that's going to reduce your risk. Or hey, I guess I can eat as many 2 pieces of the pep as I want to now, because I mean it ain't going to help me or hurt me one way or another. With prostate cancer. So what do we do with that in terms of lifestyle changes, other than obviously doing what we've been doing, if we don't know what we can do to help reduce the impact of prostate cancer, which is the #2 killer for Black men in terms of diseases?
Yeah, and I'm thankful you brought that up, because there certainly is something where sometimes people get information and say, if this is my risk of getting it, I can't do nothing about it. So I'm gonna go ahead, one life.
I'm gonna give me another 2 pieces of the pepper.
I'm gonna get another one, because what's the point, right? And then there are also people who then sometimes go the other way and say, I'm gonna, prevent this by, Googling, what diets can I have to, reduce cancer. And I also want to say that, there are dietitians out there that can be helpful in saying these are the things that you can do, but there isn't a proven one-stop shop for if you have this cancer or this risk for cancer, eating this particular thing, or this particular way is going to completely make it where you don't get cancer. I also want to be mindful that if I'm telling you that you've got a 20% chance to get prostate cancer, you flip that number, it also means you got an 80% chance to not get it. So sometimes it's helpful to look at that too, to see what to do about that. And now that we have that all out of the way, we know that we don't know, you can't control other people's tires. So you don't know when you're going to get in a car accident, but it doesn't mean that you don't buckle your seatbelt. Right. And it doesn't mean that buckling your seatbelt doesn't mean that you're not going to die. It's still a way for, if you get hit with that car, that you will live. Now, yeah, there are some things of like maybe not drinking alcohol, maybe not driving through Deep Ellum at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night. You're probably going to have a higher chance of getting into a car wreck then, right? There are things you can do. It's the same thing with prostate cancer. You still want to try to do the best that you can do to live a lifestyle that is healthy. And that healthy is something that can be tricky, right? I see a lot of times people go and get a salad to eat. If I get a salad to eat with my dad, it's got brisket on there, it's got chicken on there. For some reason, it's got pickles on there. The lettuce that's used is iceberg shredded lettuce. It's not even the lettuce that's going to give you a lot of flavor, and it's drenched to the gods in ranch, right? And it's like, bam, it's a salad. Or I'm drinking a smoothie. What's in there? Oh, banana, apples, about 48, thousand milligrams of sugar, applesauce, whatever. And it's like, I got my smoothie and I'm drinking 3 of these a day. Okay, that's a whole bunch of sugar. So it's not always something that you know how to eat healthy. You may really think that you're eating healthy, or thinking that because you're eating chicken and not red meat, which red meat can be something that leads to an increased risk for colon cancer. We learned that in about 2016, 2017. You're thinking if you're not eating those things, you're eating chicken, that you're fine, but the chicken you're eating is loaded with a whole bunch of salt, right? It's blackened. That's my favorite type of way to eat the chicken, is blackened, or it's fried chicken. So I say that to say, first, give yourself some grace and know that it may take you some time to learn how to eat the right way or eat healthy, but certainly do that. Do that after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday, so you're not saying to do that right now, but something to think
We have turkey dressing and the ham. It's on the
we together on that. Dressing is my thing. I have a whole shirt that says I'm here for the dressing, and that's my specialty, is making dressing. Not
Dressing
cooking,
person.
but dressing. Yes, cranberry sauce, giblet gravy. I get that. You want to do things that feeds your soul, right, Kandra? That's something that takes the stress off a little bit, even though you pay for it. But even exercise, and no one's saying that you have to go and run a half marathon. And certainly if you're someone who's thinking I have an increased risk anyway, not to do that. But if you walked, just to your stairs and back today, maybe walk to the mailbox and go out. Like, take those steps to do things that are healthier. And the last thing that I'll say is you have to go to your doctor. You have to go to a doctor, especially things like getting your prostate examined. That's pretty routine. You can usually see if there's clinics or other places where you can get that PSA, which is that blood test for prostate cancer. If you're having problems going to the bathroom, if you're having problems performing in the bedroom, this is your life. This is your life. You go in and talk to your doctor. You can say a couple words. You don't have to give them the whole rundown, and they'll know what you're there for and to check you out for that, so that you can be treated and so that you can find can keep your prostate and make sure that's something that you don't have to think about.
And so we don't know, if my understanding is correct, if they are checking for your prostate being inflamed or swollen. We don't, to my knowledge, know of a way that's going to help reduce the size of the prostate, or do it?
Yeah, so once people know that you have a large prostate, they'll do the testing and see if it's prostate cancer. And if it's not prostate cancer, then that's when your doctor will start to recommend other treatments, other therapies, other medicines to the whole goal will be to reduce the size of the prostate.
And I can hear some people out there saying right now, are there any natural ways to do this without taking the pharmaceuticals and that kind of thing? Because there's obviously a growing community of folks who want to do things naturally if they can.
And I am certainly appreciative of that. And my thing is, and what your doctor's thing should be, is if it hasn't been proven to harm you, then you can try it. There's a lot of natural things or things out there that people bring up where, I hear a lot about cranberry juice, or hear a lot of different concoctions. And even after this, for those of you who are listening, your computer's always listening, so your algorithm will pull up some other thing when you log in tomorrow, to Google it. It'll say, oh, here's some other natural remedy. And while it is true that the people who came before us, the ancestors, had other ways to combat things that we didn't, but not all those ways worked. And that's why now we do have a higher life expectancy, because there are other things that we do. With that being said, there isn't one thing that I can say, go to Sprouts, go to Whole Foods, go to GMC, and then you're going to be able to see that this particular substance, this particular pill is going to help you. And if somebody is selling you that, that's garbage. I say that because I don't want you to waste your money thinking that's the only way to do it. But if you want to do that in combination with the treatment, talk to your doctors about it, because there are some natural things that we say, no, that's going to counteract what's going on here. Or you can still say, I don't want to do that. I want to do this route. And they can say, hey, we can say, although I want you to do this other treatment, go ahead and go this way and try that. And then if it doesn't work, let me know. Again, generally prostate cancer is pretty slow growing, and there's still usually a way that you can handle that where it's okay. But I do want to always say that unfortunately there are some more aggressive cancers where people do walk out and say, I want to go and try this natural thing. And you might say, because everybody I know who had cancer died, but they didn't die until they went to the doctor. And a lot of times it's because they went to the doctor when it got bad. And when it's bad, it's hard to treat. So, like I said before, if it's small radiation, we can treat it. If it's everywhere, we got to do chemotherapy and everything else. It's going to make it super hard. So, if we can find it in an earlier stage, it's likely that you're going to survive. So, coming back when you say these other things didn't work, and now you want me to treat something that is a stage 4 everywhere, yeah, the chances of that being the best way for you to get on the other side is going to be harder to do. No, there's
So,
no field that we know about, doesn't mean that you can't try them.
but if you have a relatively healthy diet, which may help lead to a relatively stronger and healthier immune system, then at least you have something that's working internally in your faith.
It means you have something that's not increasing your risk. Yes. So if you've got this risk, we don't want to keep raising it. If you've
Yeah.
got this risk and you're doing other things, yes, it can lower it always. The worst case scenario, it'll at least keep it where you're not increasing it. But absolutely.
Let's raise a question on the other side. For years, researchers have talked about fasting as a way to weaken cancer cells, since they have to feed also. And lately here, I've heard that some oncologists are starting to recommend a 3 to 5 day fast before you start cancer treatment. Can you talk about that in the last couple of minutes that we have on the benefits of fasting, or whether it's just a fad, or is it something that's real as a means to help in your cancer treatment?
Yeah, so that's something that oncologists have been saying for quite some time. I think other people have started to pick up on that being the case. But it also depends on once you know what the cancer is. You talked about things being fed. There are different things that feed cancer. So when you go in and have or get a cancer, people who've had a diagnosis know that they say we're going to do some tumor testing. What that means is that you're looking at the cancer, testing it. Like I said before, when you're trying to figure out where it came from, and you're going, oh, it came from here, it came from there. You're also then trying to figure out what's feeding this cancer. Because if I can find out what's feeding this cancer, I can cut off the food supply. What you're talking about is something that I am a fan of personally, something called intermittent fasting that some people have taken up. Where I think anytime you hear fasting, at least me and my Bible Belt self was like, oh, this is when, we couldn't eat for a while and mama would slap us if we ate something because we're supposed to be fasting to hear from the Lord. Intermittent fasting is different. There are different ways where you go for a prolonged period of time without eating. It doesn't mean that you're going days without eating. It doesn't mean that you're, doing the fast that some people make up where you go, I'm fasting, but you're just like, well, I'm fasting from shrimp. So, okay, but you're still eating, so you're not fasting. So there are ways that they can say, if they say you're going to fast before, they might not be saying, Jimmy, that you're going to be fasting for 3 days without eating anything. It may be, hey, for these days, don't eat for 16 hours and then for 8 hours you can eat. But that's going to be dependent on the cancer. So if I can find the source of what's feeding the cancer, and if it's glucose, if it's some other thing that you're getting in your body, then that's when, depending on the cancer, you recommend how to do that. Now, there are doctors and oncologists that swear by fasting in general as a way to do that. So someone like me, I do intermittent fasting where I don't generally eat after 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Today is a little bit different. And I start eating at 11 o'clock. And I have alarms on my phone to do that. That's a health thing that I do, but that I have to train my body to do. If you have diabetes, if you have high blood pressure, if you're on medications and whatever, these are things that you want to talk to your doctor about, because fasting can be counterproductive to what you need to do. So you want to make sure that you're balancing those other things with doing that. But for me, I have a family history of diabetes. Intermittent fasting is something that helps with insulin levels. I don't have diabetes or pre-diabetes, but it's just a way of me to try to do what you said to me, try to see what can I do, since I know that I have this family history and it's automatically increasing my risk a little bit. Let me try to bring that down. But fasting can be something that helps for people who have a cancer diagnosis if we know what's feeding the cancer.
And then one more question, concern. So years ago, there was all this talk about there may be a cure for cancer, especially when I believe the former president Jimmy Carter got brain cancer. I believe this is research led by Duke University, where they injected cancer cells with the flu virus. And it seemed like it was promising in their tests. And since then, you haven't heard anything else about it. So where are we with those type of researchers on finding a cure for cancer?
Yeah, and anytime I hear that, find a cure for cancer, cancers are different. You're hearing me saying that. So to say that, I'm finding the cure, for cancer, that's a hard thing to do because each cancer where it grows is a different reason for why that happens. And certainly I remember when Jimmy Carter got that cancer because our clinics blew up with that. There's pancreatic cancer that actually spread to different parts of his body where that started from. It was Joe Biden's son that died a little bit before that of a glioblastoma, which is a brain cancer. So all these different things. Anytime you're hearing of research, it's just that. It means that we found something that might have worked in an animal study or something else, but now we can move it to humans to see if it works. I am working with the National Institutes of Health with the All of Us research program. You can join that free program at joinallofus.org. That is something that is looking at all of our genes because even the genetic information that we're looking at to figure out what's causing disease and what's not is flawed because, like I said before, we being Black people and really all people of color are not in those research studies. So if we increase the amount of people who are in those research studies that look like you, that look like me, it can give us better understanding of what to do. Now, even with that particular thing, usually when you have those trials, what we can find are better treatments to try to make sure we can get a cancer in remission if we can, but it generally isn't the cure for cancer. You're
So is
not
that
going
food
to get
therapy that phased out now? Is that still considered viable and
so
worth?
there are quite a few studies with that. So you can always go and look at the different research studies that are with that. With that particular one, even with Folafox and other chemotherapies that are out there, they work. But it's just a matter of still figuring out what the nature of cancer and how cancers interact in different people's bodies. What works for you might not work for me, and that's on researchers and other people to figure out why that is.
Okay.
But generally, even when you're doing that, that came out or he had that cancer in 2017, 2016, 2017. It takes some years, some time for people to say, stamp of approval, this is going to work. So I know that raises a lot of hope in people when they hear something and go, oh, I can get this right now and know about it. But it takes years of getting the data and seeing how people are and seeing do they stay
Yeah,
in
I thought we
remission.
were really close, and I thought by
Yeah.
now it would be just everyday kind of therapy treatment that would be kind of mainstream as opposed to still trials and experimental.
Yeah.
There
I
are
don't. I wanted to say something real quick in regards to the research. I'm not for sure if y'all are familiar with the Aura Lee Smith Foundation. Dr. Hadia Nicole Green. She is a graduate of Tuskegee University, and I know her personally. And she has been able to cure cancer in rats through lasers. And so she has been on this journey of getting funded so that she can do some more clinical trials and do some more research so that it can be brought to those
I
that are
did
in
see.
need.
I believe it was a few weeks ago. I saw that a few articles.
Yes.
And I know we're about to close out, Jimmy. We're right at time. There were a couple of questions that came up. I want to thank and acknowledge a couple of folks. Beauty Cutie, who's online with us, and Larry Turrentine, who does have a question. And then, of course, our constant supporter, Uncle Asar Al-Kabilan. So there are a couple of questions. One, have there been any studies on what role does high fructose corn syrup play in maybe that feeding part of cancer that stimulates cancer? That's from Uncle Asar. And then it looks like Larry has a question. Is the incidence of prostate cancer in Black African countries similar to those in the U.S.? I don't know if there's any studies or research out there that shows that as well. First, high fructose corn syrup, and then are there similar incidences in Black African countries as in the U.S.?
Yes, high fructose corn syrup has been something that has done some real damage to our bodies, but it's pretty much everywhere. While that is something that can increase the risk for cancer, there's not a one-to-one link with that, meaning I can't go on and go, oh, high fructose corn syrup increases the risk for this particular cancer in general, as much as I can say how much it does for different things like diabetes and things like that, that it really impacts the risk for. So high fructose corn syrup, you're always going to hear people say stay away from that if you can. Um, that is one where there is data out there. It gets cloudy on that because
There's a lot of data, Ms. Claire, Ms.
say
Carla.
that again.
I say there's a lot of data out there, but that data, the link will never ever be proven because can you imagine lawsuits from every food manufacturer who use high fructose corn syrup.
It's in everything. It is in everything.
That's what I was getting at.
So
Absolutely.
even if there's a link, there won't be a link ever disclosed. So
Right.
you
So
just,
when I say that there's data out there, it's buried because even if when you do look at that data, and if it's you want to look at who's funding
right.
that data. But the answer is you got that spot on. Everything about that is if you can stay away from it. Again, it's hard because it's everywhere. And if, again, for people who don't have a lot of funds, if you're getting things without high fructose corn syrup, they cost more money.
It's cheap.
Yeah.
Sugar.
The second thing is the risk for prostate cancer in Black African men is lower than that in Black American men. And so that's another thing where that stress comes in. And they're also looking at studies of trying to figure out those Black African men, first generation versus second generation versus people who are coming over. It's generally in those who are the immigrant population. And then once you start getting down to their children, to those people who've been Americanized, it starts to be the same as what we see in Black.
And Carla, are you saying African men go through less stress because of Black women, African women, than Black men in America? Are you inadvertently trying to make a point here?
I am not, but I see how you try to make that very postulate leap of causation when, again, you can look more at the systems that are in place. You can look at how the diets are different. You can look at how the culture, even though we're all part of the diaspora, how that's different. But certainly, double down very hard to an African woman and see if you think that there's less stress there. There's different levels.
You can't have you on the show unless I try to get a rise out of you.
There's different levels of accountability, and you would get that all the time. But yeah.
So what you were saying is, and I don't know that he's speaking about, or what Larry was speaking about, were African men who have immigrated to the U.S., but quite possibly African men who are in the motherland, in the African countries. And has there been any research or prevalence that shows a correlation in terms of, statistically speaking, how likely they are to happen?
Right. So again, even those who are in the motherland, it's lower. Now, when you look at the studies that are here, or a lot of the studies, you'll just see Black. And a lot of times they haven't parsed that out to say what Black is, because again, just people who are doing the study design are not us. So they look at us as all the same, right? And even that's with other cultures too, where they'll just say Hispanic, and it's like, is that Mexico? Is that Colombia? What are we dealing with? It's that same thing. So I think that's a really great question to think about. But the studies that we do see where it's just been done in the motherland, or people who recently immigrated over, it does show that there is not as high of a risk as prostate cancer when you see in Black American men.
Very interesting.
I'm less stressed for the women. Till they come in and get Americanized.
I'm going to leave him where he's at.
Anyways, to the end of the show, we don't have enough time to start a fight. You see how that goes?
See, increasing the risk of stuff just sitting over there. That's
right.
All right, well, why don't we do this? We are right at the top of the hour. This has been outstanding in terms of information.
Yes, thank you for all the information.
Thank you both. So I'd like for you both to share any closing comments you might have. And one question I didn't get a chance to ask Kandra is just, even though we're focusing on prostate cancer and Black men, the role that wives and the women in their lives who help, take care of them, and how that may impact them in terms of their overall care, not just physically, but psychologically as well, and dealing with that as well. But we can make short order of this, and then we can close out this show since it is right about 9:05. Kandra, we'll let you make any closing comments, and then Kandra, then we'll close out our show for this evening.
Yeah. I mean, in regards to the wives, like you mentioned, I think, like I mentioned earlier, it's the same as far as caregivers. I think they play the same role. As a caregiver, you need to provide that support, try to give the autonomy, and seek out the resources for yourself. What's it like being a family member of someone with cancer? How can you take care of yourself first so that you can be there to take care of your loved one? And then in regards to the individuals that have been diagnosed with cancer, I think the takeaways is to get a good support system, join a support group, find a therapist, be able to communicate with your family, with those that are helping you as far as medical providers, and just communicating your needs and what will be best for you to help you get through this tough time. So I would say those are the takeaways in regards to the mental health aspect of it.
And Carla, when you do make your closing comments, you mentioned earlier about the likelihood. I mean, if you have someone in your family that does have prostate cancer, you mentioned the genetic testing that may be covered by your medical insurance. So in your closing comments, can you include that as well? Because I think that's very useful information for a lot of people out there.
Yes, so certainly something that you want to look at is going through genetic testing. If you have a family history of someone who had an aggressive prostate cancer, or if they passed away from prostate cancer, what you want to do is talk to your doctor. If you've had prostate cancer yourself, talk to your doctor, but also if you've had the other cancers that I mentioned, prostate cancer in the presence of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer. Knowing the types of cancers is going to be very helpful so that you can have genetic testing to first see if we can find the reason for why you've got that prostate cancer. And then from there, if you do have a gene that's causing that, notifying other people in the family because they may be at risk for that as well. Genetic testing is generally something that has to go through insurance to be approved. However, if you don't have insurance, there are other resources. You can look down and email me at thegoodgenesgcservices@gmail.com if you have other questions. But certainly bring this up to to your doctor. If you're hearing these things and you're going, my granddad had prostate cancer, and I think his sister had breast cancer, that's a red flag. Red flag to please get tested. These genes, when we find them, don't skip generations, but like Tommy kind of mentioned before, they can hide out or seem like they're hiding out depending on who you are. Do all the things that you can. Take care of yourself. If you've had a cancer, I'm only talking about things that are increasing the risk. You are not the cause or the reason why you had cancer. So many times we try to find a reason why. Maybe it's because I smoked, did this or did that. They can increase risk for cancer, but we know people who don't lead healthy lives at all, that go their whole life and don't get cancer. We're still trying to find things out. What we want you to do is take better care of yourself. That comes with the power of sharing the information about your health history and also making sure that other people know that so that they can share their history as well. We're coming up on a great holiday, Thanksgiving. While you're eating your dressing, while you're eating your turkey, talk about your health history too. It's a good time as a family and together.
Outstanding. It looks like everybody knows when the show is over with. The dogs decided, and Carla's little one came up, so everybody knows it's time for the show to be over. We want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We hope you've gotten some value from this information. Of course, we will have Ms. Kandra and Ms. Carla back in the future, and we have basically told them they will be coming back periodically to talk to things because they provide such invaluable insight and information. So we want to thank you so much for what you're doing for our listeners today, Jimmy. And Jimmy, if you have any other closing comments, that's it for this evening.
No, just thank you very much, and look forward to having you both back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.